The American Revolution wasn't inevitable, wasn't clean. It definitely wasn't a story of heroic geniuses who knew exactly what they were doing. It was chaos. It was doubt. It was a collection of ordinary people, farmers, merchants, printers who somehow outlasted the most powerful empire on the planet. This is the real story of how a fragile rebellion survived every reason to fail and accidentally built a nation that would reshape the world. In the early 1700s, the American colonies were loyal but restless. They weren't plotting independence. They were just sick of being ruled by a government 3,000 miles away that taxed them, ignored them, and acted like they were children. Then Britain, drowning in war debt, squeezed harder. Taxes, restrictions, troops in the streets. But the colonists didn't snap just because of money. They snapped because of disrespect. Nobody wants to be treated like they don't matter. The revolution began not with a battle, but with a mindset shift. We dainty need a king to tell us who we are. By 1775, protests turned into gunfire. Lexington Concord. The first shots were fired by militia who had almost no training. The colonies weren't united. They weren't prepared. They didn't even agree on independence yet. Think about that for a second. The war had already started. Half the leaders still thought they could negotiate their way out of it. This wasn't a polished revolution. It was a panic response that slowly evolved into a purpose. Enter George Washington, a tall, quiet figure with more failures than victories in his military career. He didn't have the best strategy, but he had one thing the rebellion desperately needed: unshakable endurance. He didn't have to win every battle. He just had to keep the army alive. Britain responded like an empire does: fast, brutal, and overwhelmingly powerful. They sent the largest expeditionary army in their history to crush the rebellion. Redcoats flooded the colonies, warships blocked ports, cities burned. Washington's troops were underfed, undersupplied, and marching in rags. He lost New York. He lost Long Island. He lost battle after battle. And yet, the revolution didn't die. Why? Because the Americans weren't fighting a conventional war. They didn't need to defeat the British. They just needed to outlast them. An empire bleeds when it's forced to fight a war with no finish line. The longer the war dragged on, the more expensive it became, and the more Britain's will to fight began to fade. The lowest moment came at Valley Forge, during the winter of 1777. No food, no shoes, no morale. A third of the army was ready to quit. This should have been the end. Instead, something strange happened. Suffering forged discipline. Prussian officer who rewired the army with harsh training and even harsher standards, the ragtag militia evolved into a real fighting force. Valley Forge didn't break the revolution. It refined it. Revolutions don't collapse from pain, they collapse from doubt. And Washington's men, though they suffered immensely, no longer doubted why they were suffering. The revolution was still losing more than it won. But momentum shifted the moment America gained something priceless, a partner even Britain feared. That partner was France. After the American victory at Saratoga, France realized the rebels might actually have a chance. Now, France didn't join out of a love for America. They joined because they hated Britain, and this single alliance changed everything. Suddenly, the rebels had money, weapons, naval power, and global legitimacy. It wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was an international problem, and Britain suddenly had to fight a war on multiple fronts. Empires don't panic when rebels rise. Empires panic when rivals join the rebels. The final turning point came in 1781 at Yorktown. The British general Cornwallis fortified his position on a peninsula, thinking the Royal Navy would rescue him if things got rough. Washington and the French had other plans. They surrounded him on land, while the French Navy blocked any escape by sea. It was a perfect trap, the kind that only works once in history. Cornwallis surrendered. Hearing the news, the British Parliament called it the end of offensive war in America. They weren't defeated militarily, not really. They were defeated psychologically. The cost of the war was no longer worth the control. When an empire decides a fight is too expensive, the war is over. By 1783, the Treaty of Paris recognized the United States as independent. That should have been the triumphant ending, but it was actually the beginning of a new crisis. The new United States had no stable currency, no national army, no unified government, and no global reputation. There was no guarantee the experiment would even survive. The founders had beaten an empire, but now they had to build a functioning nation out of 13 competing states. Winning their freedom took 8 years. Building a country would take far longer. The real miracle wasn't victory. It was endurance, political, economic, and personal. The American Revolution wasn't a story of destiny. It was a story of resilience, improvisation, and improbable survival. Ordinary people fought an extraordinary fight. Not because they were certain of victory, but because they refused to return to who they were before. And that's the real legacy of the revolution, a belief that identity can be rebuilt, that systems can be challenged, and that a group of underestimated people can rewrite the direction of history with enough discipline, sacrifice, and patience. The United States wasn't born perfect. It was born persistent, and that persistence changed the world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe.